E aí, rapaziada, tudo bem com vocês? Bernardo aqui, o Befras, pra mais um vídeo, rapaziada, então bora lá. I tried to fix the Flash using VFX, ou seja, né, eu tentei consertar o filme do Flash usando efeitos especiais. Então, bora assistir esse vídeo aí, rapaziada, do canal aqui, Noman R Productions.
I think it's fair to say that The Flash has its fair share of issues, but one of the biggest ones is for a movie all about a guy whose whole thing is running, he runs like he's still trying to figure out what his limbs do.
Nossa, velho, essa cena, nossa, que cena.
I want to focus on this scene in particular, where the Flash runs from Central City to Gotham all in one shot. It's actually a really cool scene, but I just can't enjoy it to its fullest because I'm distracted by this goofy running. So I'm going to try to use my VFX skills to make the Flash run like a normal human. So first, I took this shot from the movie and cut it down in DaVinci Resolve so that it would be a bit more manageable. So instead of having to replace 40 seconds worth of running, I just have to replace like 7. Now obviously I'd love to fix the whole movie, but I've got finals next week and literally no sense of time management, so I have to get this done in a week. Kinda like the VFX artist for the actual movie. So first I needed a 3D model of the Flash. After looking around on Google, I found this really
Nossa, velho, mano, que loucura. Loucura, tipo, que os caras fazem assim do nada.
nice model
E
from
vai,
CVR
daí sai
experts on
melhor que o filme.
Sketchfab. Thank you for your services. It is not 100% accurate to the movie since it uses the mask from his Justice League suit, but I'm completely fine with that because the mask is the worst part of the movie suit. Like, I'm not a costume designer or anything, but it just frames his face in a really unflattering way. He looks weird. Anywho, the model itself was really nice, but the materials did take a little bit of TLC to get looking good. So I started by downloading a leather texture and applying that to the suit. I got the texture from productioncrate.com. They have a lot of VFX assets and 3D models you can download, but did you also know that they have materials? Now most of them are listed as pro only, but if you're on the free plan like I am, you can actually download a 1K version of them. They aren't sponsoring this video, I just think they're really cool. Then I found this line pattern on Canva to replicate the kind of maze pattern he has going on the suit. So I used texture painting to isolate where I wanted that to show up on the suit, then used that to drive some bump on the suit. I played around a bit with adding the glowing lines he has in the movie, but ultimately decided that it looked better without them. Now at this point the suit was looking pretty good, but I wasn't happy with the face. It was looking kind of waxy. Kind of like the faces in the actual movie. Okay, I'm done taking shots of the movie. I can't promise that. I thought it would be a cool detail if I added Ezra Miller's actual face to it.
It's my face. So my face.
Now if you saw my MODOK video, you know that there's a website that lets you take a picture of a face and turn that into a 3D model. Then I can project that image back onto the model as the texture. Now ideally for this method, you want to find a picture where they're looking straight at the camera and with very neutral lighting. Yeah, that'll work. To do this, you just want to look at your face through the front view, then press Ctrl-Alt-Num.
Cara, eu não sei como, mas o Ezra Miller, quando ele, tipo, na vida normal dele, ele só... Uma hora ele tá parecendo maconheiro, outra hora ele tá parecendo mendigo e... Sei lá, velho, por quê, velho? Não sei também se essa é impressão minha, deixa aí nos comentários.
Has 0 to set that as the camera view. Then add your picture as the background image in the camera. In edit mode, you can use proportional editing to make sure everything fits. Then in the UV tab, select everything from the camera's view, right-click and hit Project from View. Now you can give that a material and plug your image into the color. You can make it look better by bringing down the roughness, maybe use your image to add some bump for some added detail, then give it some subsurface scattering. This obviously won't hold up on close-ups, but it works surprisingly well for more out-of-focus stuff. Also, I can't prove this, but I'm like 70% sure this is what they did for those awful CGI cameos. Who thought those were a good idea? So now I needed to make him move. I exported everything as an FBX and threw that into Mixamo to rig it and get some animation. I found this running animation and brought up the speed and the overdrive to make him go fast. So I exported my rig and the animation as an FBX and brought that into my scene. I applied the animation to my rig, but the arms were clipping into himself. After fiddling around a bit, I figured out it was because his rest position was in an A pose instead of a T pose. It took like 50 Google searches, but I eventually fixed it and now he was running. Next I started working on matching the camera from the original shot. Now obviously getting a good camera track on this shot would be basically impossible, so I just had to eyeball it. Thankfully, the camera movement wasn't too complicated, just a smooth rotation around the Flash. To replicate this, I added an empty right where the Flash was and then parented my camera to that. Then I went through the shot and keyframed the rotation of that empty, making sure everything matched the original. Something that really helped at this step was viewport renders. If you go to View and Render Viewport Animations, you can get a render of just your scene without textures or lighting. This can be a huge help for nailing down animations, since it basically takes no time to render and I can overlay it on top of the original in DaVinci just to make sure everything's lining up. I lit my scene using an HDRI I got for free from HDRI Haven. To make it look like buildings were blocking the light, I added a plane.
Mano, como que ele vai tirar o flash de baixo? Que é o do filme de verdade. Ah, velho, só de ver essa tela aí do que aplica do Blender, nossa, pelo amor de Deus. Velho, mano, cara, por que as coisas são tão difíceis?
camera. Then I keyframed that to move on and off, casting a shadow on the flash. I also added a light behind him to act as the light that's being cast by the lightning behind him. Now at this point I was ready to hit render. Since I'm so pressed for time on this project, I use Eevee to render everything. Now Eevee doesn't look as realistic as Cycles, but honestly for this shot, since there's so much motion blur, it won't make that much of a difference in the final product. Now we get to my favorite step of the process, compositing. This is where I take my render and marry it with the footage so that they look like they belong together. And my compositor of choice is the Fusion tab in DaVinci Resolve. So first I needed to remove the original flash from my shot so that I can add my own flash to it. And I did this using AI. Now wait. I know people get up in arms whenever AI gets mentioned, so I want to clarify what I mean. When most people think of AI, they usually think of AI-generated images, where an AI is trained on tons of pre-existing images, usually without the permission of the artist, and uses those to make a new image using parts of all the old images. Now this is a huge oversimplification, but you get the gist. What I used is different. It's more like the constant aware fill in Photoshop, where it looks at the area surrounding a selection and uses that to fill it in, which saves me time from having to paint it out frame by frame by frame. In my opinion, this is the best use of AI, automating simple repetitive tasks like paint out or rotoscoping so that you have more time to make creative decisions. So just so we're on the same page, stealing art bad, saving time good. Alright? So DaVinci Resolve does have a tool that do this, but it's only in the paid version, which I don't have. So I found this website Photor that has a free alternative. The only limitation is that you can only upload 3 seconds at a time and the output is fairly low resolution. But that wasn't a big deal for me since I only needed the area around the flash. So I brought that into Fusion and made a mask to roughly follow the flash. Then I used that to cut out the clean plate I made. I added my render on top of that and it lined up pretty well. I did some basic compositing by adding some blur, some light wrap, and some color correction to match the orange hue that the original shot has. Now it was looking pretty good except for one thing. I needed a way to put the lightning from the original shot on top of him, so I ended up using a luminance key to isolate just the brightest parts of the image, and then I used some masks to make sure it only got the lightning. Then I added that on top of the flash. Honestly, I'm surprised with how well this works. So I went through the same process for all the other shots until I had this result. Enjoy.
Tá, isso aí ainda é do filme.
Honestly, I think this turned out pretty well, especially with the time restraints I was under. I think if I had more time, I'd like to...
Mano, com o tempo que ele teve, velho, eu fazia o... Tô brincando. Nossa, rapaziada, isso 1 ano eu acho que eu não conseguia fazer. Mano, é muito... Pelo menos me parece ser muito complicado.
Just to see if that would look better, but the motion is the most important part, and I think this gets the idea across. If you want to see me fix more VFX shots for movies, then you can check out this video right here, where I fix the CGI...
Legal. Bom, rapaziada, esse foi o vídeo de hoje, espero que vocês tenham gostado. Dê like, se inscreve, eu sei que é chato, mas eu peço do mesmo jeito. Rapaziada, o link do vídeo que eu assisti, meu canal secundário, os dois estão na descrição. Aqui tá a pelota do meu canal e aqui tá um vídeo que o YouTube acha que você vai gostar. Valeu, falou e tchau, tchau. Até a próxima, fui!